Milo had always been a man of the forest. His weathered face, deeply lined from years of exposure to the sun and wind, was a map of his life in the wild. His hands, rough and calloused, told stories of countless hours spent chopping wood, setting traps, and tracking animals. Milo lived on the edge of a small village nestled between thick forests and towering mountains. The village was quiet, with only a handful of houses scattered along the dirt roads. While most villagers worked as farmers, Milo had chosen a different path. He was a hunter, and a skilled one at that. He had been hunting for as long as he could remember, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. Hunting wasn't just a means to make a living for Milo, it was a way of life. It was in his blood. Each day he ventured into the deep woods where he knew the land as well as he knew the back of his hand. He knew the tracks of every animal, from the smallest rabbit to the largest deer, and he had learned how to predict where they would go and when. This skill was what set him apart from other hunters. It was early in the morning when Milo began preparing for his hunt. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the forest floor. He pulled on his worn boots, grabbed his trusty rifle, and headed out toward the dense woods. He had a particular target in mind today, a large buck he had been tracking for several days. The buck was known to roam in this part of the forest, and Milo had seen its tracks the day before. He felt confident that today would be the day he finally caught it. Milo had already set up a few traps along the animal's usual path, but the trap he was most excited about was a large snare near a clearing. He had spent the previous evening setting it up, carefully selecting the perfect location. The snare was designed to catch the animal by the neck and hold it in place. It was a trap he had used many times before and had always been successful with. Milo knew that if he caught the buck in this trap, it would provide him with enough meat to last for several weeks. As he walked deeper into the forest, Milo's mind wandered to his childhood. He had grown up in these very woods, learning how to hunt from his father. Those were some of his fondest memories, sitting by the fire with his father, listening to stories of their ancestors and their adventures in the wild. His father had taught him everything he knew about survival in the forest, how to track animals, how to build shelter, how to find food and water. Milo often thought of his father, who had passed away several years ago, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything he had learned. When he reached the clearing, Milo knelt down to check the snare. It was perfectly set, the noose positioned just right for the buck to walk into. He stood up and surveyed the surrounding area, looking for any sign of the animal. He could see the fresh tracks of the deer, and he knew that it had passed through here recently. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Today was going to be a good day. Milo spent the next few hours walking through the woods, checking on his other traps and keeping an eye out for any sign of the buck. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. Milo felt at home in the stillness of the woods. It was a place where he could think clearly, where he could connect with nature in a way that no other place allowed. The forest was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the stresses of the world and focus on the simple task at hand. As the sun began to set, Milo returned to the clearing where he had set the snare. He had hoped to find the buck already caught, but as he approached, he felt a surge of excitement mixed with disappointment. The snare was empty. The buck had not been caught. Milo cursed under his breath. He had been so sure that today would be the day. But the forest was unpredictable, and sometimes even the best-laid plans didn't work out. He crouched down to inspect the area around the snare, looking for any signs that the buck had been close. There in the dirt, he noticed a strange set of tracks. They were not the usual hoof prints of a deer. These tracks were smaller, and they looked more like the footprints of a person. Milo's heart skipped a beat. He had never encountered a person in this part of the forest before. He had always been alone on his hunts. The tracks were fresh, which meant that whoever had left them was nearby. For a moment, Milo considered turning back. He didn't like the idea of running into another person out here. But curiosity got the better of him. He followed the tracks, moving quietly through the underbrush. The tracks led him deeper into the woods, away from the clearing and toward a thicket of trees. As he pushed through the dense foliage, he caught a glimpse of movement ahead. Someone or something was moving through the woods. Milo crouched low, staying hidden behind a large oak tree. He peered around the trunk, trying to get a better look. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A young woman was standing in the middle of a small clearing, looking around nervously. She was dressed in tattered clothing, and her long, tangled hair hung in front of her face. Her eyes darted from side to side as if she was trying to find something or someone. Milo could tell immediately that she didn't belong in the forest. She looked out of place like a person who had been lost for far too long. Before Milo could move, the woman stepped forward, and he saw her foot catch on something hidden in the underbrush. In a split second, she was jerked forward, and the snare Milo had set for the buck tightened around her neck. Milo's heart raced. Without thinking, he sprang into action, rushing toward the woman. He quickly knelt down and began to work the snare loose, his hands trembling as he tried to free her. The woman struggled, panic in her eyes as she gasped for air. Milo's thoughts raced. What was she doing here? Who was she? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the snare came undone and the woman collapsed into Milo's arms, gasping for breath. He held her gently, trying to calm her down as she coughed and choked, her hands shaking. She looked up at him, wide-eyed and terrified. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely. "I thought I was going to die." Milo didn't know what to say. He had expected to find an animal in his trap, but not this. He helped the woman to her feet, unsure of what to do next. She was clearly in distress, and he could see the dirt and grime on her skin, the signs of someone who had been living in the wilderness for far too long. "Are you all right?" Milo asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. The woman nodded slowly, still catching her breath. I've been lost in these woods for days. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't mean to. Who are you?" Milo interrupted, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What are you doing out here?" The woman hesitated for a moment before speaking. "My name is Ava," she said softly. I'm running away from something. Something I didn't do." Milo's mind raced. There was a story here, one he hadn't expected. And he had just saved a stranger, someone who seemed like she had been running from something terrible. Milo helped Ava walk back to his cabin, which was a small wooden structure nestled in a secluded part of the forest. The cabin had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could escape from the world and find peace in the midst of nature. It wasn't much, but it was home. The floor was creaky, the roof was patched in places, and the firewood piled outside always seemed to need restocking. But for Milo, it was a haven. He had never expected it to be shared with anyone else. As they walked, Ava leaned on Milo for support. She was exhausted, and it was clear from her movements that she had been through a lot. Her clothes were torn and her face was gaunt, as though she hadn't had a decent meal in days. Milo couldn't help but wonder how long she had been lost in the woods. He had heard rumors about people escaping the nearby prison camp, but he hadn't expected to find one of them here in the middle of nowhere. When they reached the cabin, Milo helped her inside. The interior was cozy, with a fire crackling in the hearth and a small wooden table where he often ate his meals. He gestured to a chair near the fire and told Ava to sit down. "Rest," he said softly. "You've been through a lot." Ava nodded gratefully and sank into the chair. Milo quickly gathered some firewood and added it to the flames, stoking the fire to warm the room. He then went to the small cupboard in the corner of the cabin and pulled out a loaf of bread and some dried meat. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to get her through the night. Eva took the food without hesitation, her hands shaking as she tore off a piece of bread. She ate quickly, as though she hadn't had anything to eat in days. Milo watched her quietly, unsure of what to say. He didn't know anything about her, not even why she had been running or how she had ended up in the forest. But something in her eyes told him that she was in trouble, and he couldn't just leave her out there. After a few moments of silence, Eva looked up at him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to get caught in your trap. I didn't even know it was there." Milo shook his head. "It's not your fault. You were just trying to survive. I'm glad I found you." Eva's eyes flickered with gratitude, but there was also a shadow of fear in them. She seemed to be constantly on edge, as though she was waiting for something to happen. Milo couldn't help but wonder what she was running from. What had caused her to flee into the woods like this? He decided to ask. "Why were you out there, Ava?" Milo asked gently. "What happened? Why were you running?" Ava hesitated, her eyes darting away from his. She seemed to be searching for the right words. Finally she spoke. I was accused of something I didn't do," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was part of a group that was blamed for stealing food from the village. But it wasn't us. It was someone else. They just wanted to punish us, I guess. They said we were traitors, and when they came for me, I ran. Milo listened intently, his heart sinking as he heard her story. He had heard whispers in the village about people being wrongfully accused, but he hadn't paid much attention. Now, hearing it from Eva herself, he realized how much injustice there was in the world. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, being falsely accused and then forced to flee for her life. "Why didn't you tell someone what happened?" Milo asked. "Why didn't you go to the village for help?" Eva's eyes clouded with pain. "I didn't know who I could trust," she said quietly. "The people in the village. They were all afraid. They believed the lies the authorities told them. And if I had stayed, they would have caught me. No one would have helped me." Milo nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. He had seen how quickly fear could spread in a small village, how quickly people would turn on each other when they were scared. He had seen it with his own eyes, how easily a single accusation could tear a community apart. For the next few days, Eva stayed with Milo at the cabin. She helped him with small tasks like chopping firewood and tending to the garden, but mostly she rested. She was physically and emotionally drained, and Milo could see that she needed time to heal. They spoke little, but as the days passed, they grew more comfortable with each other. Eva shared more of her story, and Milo shared memories of his own life in the woods, though he kept much of his past to himself. They had both suffered in their own ways, and somehow, their shared solitude seemed to bond them. But as the days went by, the tension outside the cabin grew. Milo began to notice the signs that the authorities were searching for someone in the woods. He saw more and more patrols passing through the forest, their eyes scanning the trees for any signs of Eva. They were looking for her, and it was only a matter of time before they would find her. Milo knew that he had to make a choice. He could turn Eva in and collect the reward that was being offered for her capture, or he could help her escape and risk everything he had worked for. The decision weighed heavily on him. On one hand, he knew that turning Eva in would mean safety for himself. He would receive a reward and his life would go back to normal. But on the other hand, he couldn't bring himself to betray her. She wasn't just some fugitive, she was a person, someone who had been wronged, and Milo couldn't turn his back on that. He had seen the fear in her eyes, and he knew that if she were caught, her life would be ruined. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Milo sat on the porch of the cabin, staring into the distance. Eva came out to join him, sitting beside him on the weathered wooden steps. She didn't say anything at first, just watched the horizon with him. The silence between them was comfortable, but it also felt heavy. "I'm scared, Milo," Eva said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I don't know what to do. They're going to find me. I can feel it." Milo turned to look at her, his heart aching for her. "I won't let them catch you," he said firmly. "I'll help you get away. We'll find a way out of here." Eva's eyes softened with gratitude, but there was still fear there, deep in her gaze. "But where will we go?" she asked. "I can't keep running forever." "What happens when they catch me?" Milo thought for a moment. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her to face this alone. He wouldn't betray her. "We'll figure it out," he said finally, determination in his voice. "We'll leave the village. We'll go into the mountains. There's a place I know where no one will find us." Eva looked at him, her expression one of relief and trust. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that there was hope. Milo stood up, offering his hand to Eva. "Come on." "We leave at first light." As the night settled around them, a sense of quiet resolve filled the air. The decision had been made. Milo would stand by Eva, and together they would face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the road to freedom wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it.